Hello and welcome back to Between the Hashes, everyone, our weekly college football primer. Coming to you from Los Angeles, California, I'm your host, Matt Keim. Today, on a Friday night, to react to the first week of the college football playoff rankings. But before we get into all that, remember to like, comment, subscribe. Who's going to win between the Commanders and the Patriots this weekend? We have a little poll out for that on the channel, so take a look at it. The moment we've all been waiting for, the rankings that actually matter, have started coming out. Here we have a look at them. Ohio State, Georgia, in this order it goes. The four teams currently in are Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, Florida State, with the next two out, Washington and Oregon, and then rounding out the top 10, in this order goes Texas, Alabama, Oklahoma, and Ole Miss. Okay, so one thing to remember is that the number one team in the rankings doesn't always make the Final Four, but it's a pretty good indication that they will. The only two teams that haven't done it were, I think it was like one of the Mississippi teams back in the original set of rankings, and Tennessee last year, because they got that ranking on the strength of a then fresh win over Alabama in Knoxville. And so one of the key takeaways I get from this is that Ohio State is very well set up for a repeat of what happened last year. Now, for those of you who might need a reminder, what happened last year is that Ohio State had ranked wins against Notre Dame and against Penn State, lost at home by actually a fairly significant margin to Michigan, but there was some chaos outside of there, and because they were sitting at 11-1 with two ranked wins and a number of other decently rated wins, they slid in there at number 4 and ended up playing Georgia. I think they're kind of being set up to do something like that this year. One of the big takeaways from the rankings is that I think this committee, what they're telling us is that they value resume over everything else, at least when it comes to the top spot, because Georgia and Michigan don't have resumes. They both have strengths of schedules in the triple digits. Georgia at 100, and I think Michigan lies at something like 112th or something crazy low like that. Florida State is another interesting thing, because I think the big takeaway from Florida State's position and the inaugural number 4 spot is that they kind of have to win out. Now, this isn't Florida State's fault, but the rest of the conference have kind of fallen apart around them outside of maybe Louisville. North Carolina was being held up as like a top team. I was high on them for a while, and then they gave up like 300 rushing yards in one quarter to Georgia Tech. So they're done. Miami choked away a surefire win, and had they knelt the ball, they'd been in the top 10 at 7-1, or at least in the top 15. Clemson has completely fallen off the map this year, and so it's really just kind of Florida State, and then maybe if Louisville can make some noise with some outside help, maybe they could get in. But like it's Florida State kind of has to win out to get in, is kind of the impression I'm getting from this. Either that or that LSU win has to start looking better, and LSU can help them out starting this weekend. Next two out, Washington and Oregon. Oregon is the top-rated one-loss team, especially off that dominant win over Utah. And granted, that's a weird kind of weak Utah team, but again, they did something that nobody's done in 3 years and win in Salt Lake City. The back four is kind of where I personally have an issue with this, and before I go any further, here's how I'm going to do this week. Normally, I do this big, giant reveal for my top 10 videos. Because I want to spend a little bit more time talking about the initial committee rankings, I'm not going to do that this week, so I'm just going to put up my own personal rankings right now. Here they are. And you'll notice it's not that different. Like 9 of the 10 teams are still there. Maybe the order here or there is different. The difference being Ole Miss. I don't trust Ole Miss. I don't trust their line play on either the offensive or the defensive lines. Maybe I'm just holding that Tulane game, which to their credit, they won by 17. But I just Tulane pushed them around in the line of scrimmage for a whole half, and I don't trust a team that had to struggle like that. With all due respect to Tulane, they are a very solid team, but they were missing their best player on offense that day. The other thing is that if I were to take Penn State and Ole Miss and make those two teams play right now, I think Penn State would win, just because their line of scrimmage play is so much better than Ole Miss. And so I think for me, I'm not super high on Penn State as like an elite team. I don't think they belong anywhere near the playoff. I still think they're a solid top 10 team, and I think for that, I kind of give them the edge over Ole Miss. That said, the committee puts them in the 10th spot, probably because of the strength of that LSU win, which, to be honest, if that's the reasoning, I can't really argue with it. I think that's fair. Another difference with my rankings is that I still kind of am giving Georgia the benefit of the doubt. Georgia's schedule has been awful. That Florida win shouldn't convince them that they're national champions. But that said, they're on like a 25-game winning streak. They will have the chance to prove themselves in the next month, and they play Ole Miss, they play Missouri, and they play Tennessee in the next month. And then there's presumably the SEC championship against likely Alabama or LSU. If Georgia is just the beneficiaries of a weak schedule, we'll find out soon enough. I don't think Tennessee really belongs in the top 20. And so, but again, this stuff is going to sort itself out. So I'm not going to like freak out about this, because we're kind of getting at the point where it's just a handful of undefeated teams, a handful of one-loss teams, and a number of 2- and 3-loss teams, and this stuff gets increasingly subjective and harder to sort. The other thing I have is that even though Oklahoma lost in spectacular fashion to Kansas last week, I still have them above Texas. The games have to matter. They have the same record. When it came down to it, they played. And the other thing with Texas right now is that because Quinn Ewers is still dealing with that AC injury, and to be fair, Murphy, the backup quarterback, played well this past weekend, it's just hard for me to trust Texas. And if those two teams played tomorrow, right now, I still kind of favor Oklahoma in retrospect, just mainly because of the Quinn Ewers injury. If Quinn Ewers were healthy, maybe not, but when they did play at full strength, Oklahoma won. The other big difference for me is that I actually have Washington in my top 4 because they have a better win than Florida State. If we're talking about resume, the best resumes in the top 10, in no particular order, are going to be Texas, Ohio State, Florida State, and Washington. And then you're going to have like Bama and Oklahoma up there as well. The issue is that you have to reward teams for being undefeated, and to be honest, a lot of people are giving Washington grief for kind of underwhelming performances in the last few weeks, and I think especially in the college game, with the level that they were playing at and how much hype that Oregon game got, I was willing to give them a mulligan at least for that Arizona State game, just because hangover games are a very real thing at the collegiate level, and I think that's kind of what we're seeing. Washington still has to run the table, and very likely they will have to play Oregon again. So, like I said, it's going to sort itself out. One more time, here's the committee's top 10. I'm going to read it off one more time. From 1 to 10, Ohio State, Georgia, Michigan, Florida State, Washington, Oregon, Texas, Alabama, Oklahoma, and Ole Miss. My top 10 I'm going to play up right now. And before I get into the lightning round, one more thing. There's more news about that Michigan scandal. Apparently, Connor Stalions was pictured as being in the coach's boxes on the sideline of Central Michigan, which with a pass that only Central Michigan's administration could have given him. And they've been cagey in talking about it, and kind of have all but confirmed that it's him. It's not looking good for Michigan. The other day, there was a giant Zoom meeting with coaches around the Big Ten, pushing for the Big Ten to take preemptive action here. My stance on this is that, on one hand, the Big Ten is kind of screwed if they do take action and then they get it wrong before the rest of the investigation is finished. On the other hand, it's kind of absurd to me to think that Michigan, even with this being exposed, isn't going to use the intel that they've been collecting on all these teams for the past 3 years. If you seriously don't believe that intel is not going to get used, you're just lying to yourself, and it's a completely naive thing to think. And so I know Desmond Howard was going on to College Game Day and saying that, well, there's no excuse now. Well, like, they've scouted at least a dozen Ohio State games over the course of the past 2 years. Probably more than that. This is just what we know of. They've scouted 5 Purdue games, for God's sake. They don't even need to be doing that. The point being is that this is cheating that is giving Michigan a direct on-the-field advantage this season, and probably with the remainder of their opponents, Penn State and Ohio State, at the top of that list. It's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. It would surprise me to see action get taken, but I think it is justifiable for them to take that action. But it's a tough situation. I'm glad I don't have to make those decisions. I think the Big Ten is waiting for a little bit more. And reminder, the NCAA still has not sent a notice of infractions yet, or a notice of violations. And so they're still kind of taking their time with this. Remember, the scandal is only 2 weeks old, so there's a lot A lot more runway to get through here. Cheating and subjective rankings aside, let's talk about the things on the field. You know, the games. Starting with the lightning round. All right, lots of exciting games this week, and we're going to start in Austin, Texas. Kansas State goes on the road to play Austin, Texas. We all kind of left Kansas State for dead, or at least I did after that. Lost to Missouri on a 61-yard field goal, which, by the way, I cannot believe a college kicker hit that. I saw it live, and I still can't believe that happened. Quinn Ewers is still out. Texas is favored by 4. This is a tough one because Texas actually looked pretty solid even without Ewers, and they have a really, really, really good, really deep roster. That said, if there was a time for Kansas State to pull an upset, this would be it. This is a perfect opportunity for Kansas State to do it, which is kind of why I don't think it'll happen, weirdly enough. So I'm going to give Texas the win, but Kansas State the cover, Texas by 3. Number 2, another big ranked game, this time in the SEC, Missouri-Georgia. Georgia is currently favored by 15.5. Brock Bowers is still out and is probably out for at least the rest of the regular season. Missouri, on the other hand, is coming in hot on the strength of a 7-1 record. Their only loss being a come-from-behind double-digit loss to LSU. This is Missouri's big test. They outside of Ohio State, played Georgia better than anybody in the country last year. Can they do it again? Here's why I don't think that'll happen. The game's in Athens, and Georgia seems to be waking up. This is a game I'm going to give Georgia both the win and the cover just because I'm still kind of in giving Georgia the benefit of the doubt. Carson Beck has developed into a really nice quarterback. There are some pockets that are giving him Heisman praise. That won't happen. But the fact that he's even getting spoken about like that should tell you about the level that he's playing in his first year as a starter there. So Georgia wins, they cover. Number 3, Bedlam. Man, this is the last edition of this game for the foreseeable future. Oklahoma State made a point to cancel the series after Oklahoma left to go to the SEC, so this is gonna actually be our last time watching this for quite some time. Oklahoma is currently favored by 5.5. They're coming off of a dramatic loss to Kansas. Here's the thing with Oklahoma State. If we left Kansas State for dead, we did the same thing with Oklahoma State. They've been fairly resurgent. I know we're after Halloween, but they have resurrected from the grave. And it's not like they've been playing a bajillion good teams, but they have been a lot more consistent, and more importantly, their running game has been really good. Meanwhile, Oklahoma's defense, basically since the Red River game at the beginning of October, has been on a downward slide. And so this game is to see, can Oklahoma bounce back from a bad loss that exposed a lot of bad tendencies last week, or will those tendencies pull them down once more? The game is in Stillwater. The place is going to be rocking, and to be honest, Oklahoma State, it kind of seems like they're out for blood. So I'm going to give Oklahoma State the upset here. I think they win outright. All right, final lightning round game, Washington at USC. Weirdly enough, the popular pick this week is for USC to upset Washington, and the reasoning everybody's giving is that Washington's offense and defense has struggled a little bit, like since the Arizona State game, since who they played last week. They had like a close game against Stanford last week, and I gotta be honest, I don't see it. The game is in LA, and people are kind of holding up home field advantage for USC. That didn't matter in the slightest when they were giving a 200-plus yard performance to Utah's third-string quarterback. So USC has been just a mess. They've been winning the last couple of games, but they had to score 50 to beat Cal. They got embarrassed at home by Utah. They got blown out by Notre Dame. For Washington to get upset here, I just don't think USC has the cohesion as a team to pull it off. So I like Washington, and I like Washington to cover. So Washington wins, they cover, and they march on towards that Pac-12 title game. And that brings us to our headliner game of the week. LSU, Alabama, a rematch of a game that put LSU in the SEC title game in Brian Kelly's first year, this time last year. Almost a year to the day, too. Currently, Alabama is favored by 3, and the game is in Tuscaloosa. LSU's been a hard team to evaluate this year for a couple of reasons. The first of which being is that a lot of people, myself included, were a lot higher on their prospects as a defensive team than what actually ended up happening. They gave up 40-something to Florida State, and it never really got better from there. They probably should have lost to Missouri. They had to have like a double-digit come from behind win, but like USC, they had to score almost 50 to beat Missouri. They had lost in a wild fashion, gave up 55 to Ole Miss. On the positive side, Jaden Daniels should be in the mix for the Heisman. He won't win it, and part of the reason is that they've lost a few games. And, I mean, one of those games, they scored 50 points, so it wasn't his fault that they lost to Ole Miss. I mean, listen to these stats. He's thrown 25 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. LSU has become the most explosive offense in the country. That is important because Alabama's defense has risen up to a level of being one of the best in the country. They held Ole Miss, the team that put 55 on LSU, to 10. The big weakness here for Alabama is that they haven't really had the outside big play ability, at least not as consistently as they have. I mean, if you date it back to 2017 or so, here are some of the receivers that Alabama has put out. Jalen Waddle, Jamison Williams, John Mechie, just people like that. Devontae Smith won the Heisman there. They don't have anybody quite at that level. Not to say that they're not athletic, not good, but they don't have anybody that's like quite the burner that they've had at the level of that in the past. And that's a huge challenge. And it's probably, honestly, one of the biggest reasons why they lost to Texas beyond Texas's controlling of the line of scrimmage. The line of scrimmage is the big thing that worries me with LSU because their defense has been, well, really bad. They gave up 31 to Arkansas, 39 to Missouri, 45 to Florida State. It's the key matchup to watch here is even though Alabama has one of the best defenses in college, LSU's probably still going to score. Jaden Daniels, like I said, he's getting Heisman consideration. Like I said, I don't think he'll win it. And to be honest, if like Washington keeps winning or Ohio State keeps winning, I don't think he should win it. He is playing at that level. LSU, more importantly, has that big playability to where even if they're down or even if they're having a hard time on the line of scrimmage, they can kind of overcome it because of how good Daniels and his receivers are. And so that would turn around and then look at, can Jalen Milroe and company respond? They have started to show some bigger playability and have had some heroics, especially in like the Arkansas game and the Tennessee game, which was still kind of miraculous that Alabama was even able to pull those games off. But the problem is that Alabama has just been playing with fire a lot this year. They gave up a big comeback to Arkansas. They were down in a huge hole early to Tennessee. They were down to Ole Miss at one point. Even though they ended up, at least with 2 of those 3 examples, they ended up controlling those games fairly comfortably. They keep playing with fire. I've been kind of giving Alabama the benefit of the doubt here just because it's really hard to justifiably pick against the Nick Saban-led team. My gut feeling is that even though this game is in Tuscaloosa, even though Alabama has far and away the better defense of the two, this game is going to be a shootout. But then the question becomes, is with Jalen Milroe and company starting to wake up a little bit, and with LSU's defense not quite at the level that they thought, everybody thought, myself included, thought they were going to be at, can they respond? Especially at home, it should be up for them to do. Another thing is that ball security has been a little bit more of an issue for Milroe than it has been for Daniels. And so it's just, can LSU's secondary force some turnovers? They haven't been great in that area, but honestly, this is a game, if I were betting with actual money, I would stay far away from, unless it's to bet on the over. Again, if you look at historically the teams that have beaten Alabama in any incarnation of Nick Saban's Alabama teams, they usually do one of 2 things well. They control the line of scrimmage, which like Texas or Ohio State back in the playoff game, way back in the first year of it did, or they have a quarterback that has a special day, like Johnny Manziel comes to mind. I think Jaden Daniels is capable of having that kind of game, and to be honest, Brian Kelly has coached these sorts of games for years. And so he's no stranger to the spotlight. Jaden Daniels was in this position this time last year, and they were able to outduel Bryce Young. For that, I can't believe I'm going to do this. Oh, man. I cannot believe I'm going to do this, but I'm going to pick against Nick Saban here. LSU wins. They go into Tuscaloosa, they get the win, and the college football playoff landscape, the SEC race landscape gets a million times more interesting. Well, that's all we have for you guys today. Thank you for sticking around, and remember to like, comment, subscribe. We have the John Keim Report with regular updates on the Washington Commanders here on Ampire Media on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks, guys. Enjoy the games, and I'll see you next week.